Here to call this meeting to order. It's time to start, and we have a meeting tonight prior to our commission meeting, 5 o'clock special session. I'm going to ask the clerk to please announce the meeting and call the roll.
A special session is being held on Thursday, February 20th, 2014 at 5 o'clock p.m. in the commission chambers regarding the commission liaison position. Roll call. McKiernan.
Here.
Mugia. Here. Maddox.
Here.
Kane. Markley. Walters. Philbrook.
Here.
Walker. Here. Townsend.
Here.
Holland.
Here. All right, so we have a series of agenda items that the commission at our October strategic plan made a list of items that were topics of interest to discuss. I've ordered those in terms of ones that would have budget impact first in the first quarter, and so that includes this topic tonight. Commissioner Hal Walker had asked for that to come forward. I'm going to turn it over to you, Mr. Walker, to begin. Before I do that, I want to recognize Marianne Flunder, our elected official for the community college. We appreciate your being here, and be careful out there, Ms. Flunder. It's a contact sport. Okay. Boy, I'm telling you, it's a tough crowd. Well, I'm glad you're here. I'm glad you're up and about. So, turn it over to Commissioner Walker. You requested this conversation. It's all yours.
All right. What I requested was a discussion about the perhaps the best way to put it is repurposing of the position that's titled Commission Liaison. It's part and parcel of an issue that, having been on staff for many years now, being on this side, I recognize that as part-time, we're technically not employees, but as part-timers, we have the assistance of staff, and staff is often burdened with their own work that goes on. I think that we need help from time to time. I don't want every commissioner to have an assistant. That's not my goal. But I do think that there are occasions where work we need to have done, we have to, in a technical sense, go through the administrator. It then goes to the appropriate staff, and then depending on the staff person's situation or inclination, it comes back to us. Now, the commission liaison, I guess the way I would put it, I see the commission liaison position as being a liaison from the administrator to us. I guess I would redefine that and define that as the commission's liaison to the administrator. We are there are issues at times in which the commission or the commissioners or a commissioner wants to pursue a line of inquiry, and perhaps that line of inquiry is not for public disclosure until it is ready to be brought forth in a final form. I think what I look at is that the commission liaison should be more of a position that works for us than one that works for the administrator. Although it would have to be, the way the charter is set up, it would have to be that the individual still is a technical employee of the administrator, because we as the commission, without a change in the charter, can have no employees. Perhaps another method to be, this is really part of a bigger question, and perhaps is not really limited to just this one position, but it's the closest thing in the employee titles and job descriptions that has a direct working relationship with us other than through the administrator. We could certainly budget funding for consultants if we needed legal advice on how to draft an ordinance. I always felt like when I was city attorney, I was in a difficult position. I can only speak for myself, and you might. I worked for Dennis, and if a commissioner came to me and said, "Under no circumstances do you tell anybody this," well, I probably wouldn't tell Dennis unless he asked, and if he asked, I wouldn't lie to him. So there is that need for that help, maybe just in accumulating data from time to time. And as I've often heard through years of being here, staff has its own workload, and different commissioners pursue this job in a different way. Some have a constant need for supporting documents, materials, information. Some, over the years, I doubt they ever asked for a piece of information once. And I just think the whole debate of whether the commission is entitled to any additional help that belongs solely to us and is not required to be in a dual position where they have a dual allegiance needs to be addressed. The commission liaison position, I certainly feel very strongly has a great potential for us, and that probably was why I started with that position, because that was on the horizon immediately. And if I've said it to several of the commissioners, if I'm the only one that feels this way, then I won't waste your time and we'll move on to something else.
Okay. Anyone else? Commissioner Markley.
And Hal and I have talked about this a little bit, and I do agree that there is a tension in what is happening with our current liaison and how they report up the chain of command, so to speak. I personally, and this is not a reflection on our former liaison, it's just I never asked her for anything. She had a lot of duties, it seemed like, and she seemed like she was just as busy as any other staff member, but not necessarily with things that commissioners were putting on her. There were just other duties that I think she accumulated over the years while she was here that drew her away maybe from doing the tasks that were more liaison-like. I like the way Hal put it in saying, right, we feel like right now we have a liaison from the county administrator to us, and we need somebody who's our person going back the other direction, whose responsibilities are tied to what the commissioners are asking them to do and not necessarily to anything going on in the administrator's office.
Commissioner Philbrook.
Yeah, being a new commissioner, there's a lot of agreement in both directions. In other words, I've appreciate the liaison because I did utilize her and I worked her little feet off on a project with Leavenworth Road visioning, and she helped keep all the pieces together. But we need to make sure we have that availability and that he or she has time to do that. If all of us did what I did, we would need a whole nother body. We really would. I don't know how that person would manage to handle it coming from both directions. I don't. I am pleased with what I've gotten so far, but as I say, if all of us start asking for more things and need more assistance, I don't think we have the manpower in place at this point in time. And I know that there are a lot of times when I do hesitate, just like Commissioner Markley says. She saw her being very busy and didn't bother her and found out things on her own or had Janet help her. And so my feeling on this is that I think we're just undermanned on this. And I think we just need an additional person. That's all.
Commissioner Murguia.
Thanks, Mayor. I know everyone up here will find this hard to believe, but I never used Sharon McMillan. I use a lot of other staff on a regular basis, but I didn't use her services. From what I hear, she did a fantastic job, and I enjoyed her company on numerous occasions. I echo what Hal and Angela say, because I think it's real simple for me. It's hard for any of us to have two bosses. Either the commission liaison is going to answer to the commission, or they're going to answer to administration. It's a difficult position to be put into, and I think it could be structured differently and provide some of the same services it provides now.
Commissioner McKiernan.
You know, conceptually, I think there's a lot that could be of benefit here. So help me just kind of understand maybe kind of structurally how this might work. So this person would effectively work out of our office, if you will, out of our end, would help coordinate the support staff or work with the support staff that are already there, coordinate his or her efforts with the support staff that are already there, possibly direct them a little bit in terms of tasks and priorities, but then also be an expediter between our 9th floor office and be the person who knows who to go talk to, where the information is, how to get a request for information filled, to help basically be an expediter as much as a liaison, to be an expediter of tasks that might come forward. If I, say, hey, can I get a street level map of Minnesota Avenue from 3rd Street to 18th Street, this person could say, I know just the person to get that done, and might have more time to expedite that than, for example, one of our support staff who's up there right now, who's doing a lot of interface with the public. So our support staff and if I'm casting anything in the wrong line there, but our support staff who are already there continue their interface role with us and with the public, but now we've got a combination liaison expediter who can and has the time to and the authority to get engaged in matters that are maybe a little bit higher level and have a broader scope.
The comparison I was going to make, and sorry, that's why I hit my button. The comparison I was going to make is the mayor has these excellent people in his office like Maureen and Jason and Bill. This person needs to be our shared Maureen or Jason or Bill. It needs to be the person who can kind of help us manage all the craziness and put forward the initiatives we're trying to put forward. That's sort of how I would envision this person operating.
Commissioner Kane.
I use Sharon just the way you just said. And I use Sharon a lot. And I'm coming up on 9 years. And if I ask her not to say something to Doug or not to say something to Dennis, she didn't. And might have got her in trouble once or twice. But one, I like having somebody. Would I like them to respond to us? Yes. Did Sharon respond to what I needed? Yes. And I liked it that way. Now, and as excited as I get sometimes, she could get past that. But I guess everybody gets past it.
We all tried.
Right. But it would be nice to have somebody that you wouldn't have to tell, please don't say something to the administrator. And I had confidence in Sharon, and I went to her on the difficult stuff, the stuff that would need more investigation. And I would go to Hal and say, Hal, don't say nothing to Dennis, and as far as I know, he never did. And I've done that with several of the staff members, because the longer you're here, the more you're digging, and then you find out who's responsible for the information, so sometimes you just call them. But it would be nice to have somebody that say, hey, a Jason Banks like what you guys have, I call Jason more than I call anybody right now. It would be nice to have somebody call and say, hey, can you get this information for me? Because I think sometimes we all overload Janet and Becky.
McKiernan.
So having a contact person, a point person, that instead of going out and going to each individual department level or every department staff person or department head, we just go to our point person and he or she then can be more efficient in contacting those other people and funnel the requests rather than 8 of us or 9 of us or 10 of us go into one person 8 or 9 or 10 different times. Would a physical relocation, I mean, a person cast in much the same role as she's in right now, but physically located at our end of the hall, make a difference?
Got an office up there. I like that idea.
So is physical proximity as much as anything else, maybe?
Walker?
I'm okay with that, or wherever there's an office of convenience. I guess I don't like, I'm uncomfortable after all the years I was a staff member of going down directly to a department head and saying, do this for me. I want somebody empowered by us or the administrator who is like the colonel's aide. When they come down there, the colonel wants something done, you better do it, or have a good reason why it can't be done. I don't understand, I do understand. There was never a shortage of work in the legal department. And every time the commission or the mayor wanted something done and wanted it tomorrow, we had to get it done tomorrow. We tried. And sometimes that didn't work out. And the commission, we don't have a long digestive period on issues. We're moving every week, and if I ask for something today, and if I don't get a response in a month, sometimes I've moved on to some other issues, and why didn't I ever get that information 6 months down the road? Because we have refocused our attention to. We probably could fill an entire agenda of special meetings tonight for the rest of this year with topics that one or all of us want to discuss. I raise the issue because I think we are at times handicapped by this, and when you have enough interest to pursue a subject, and you're ambitious enough as a commissioner to want to get something done, or at least out in front of the body that you think is important, you shouldn't be stymied by the fact that you can't get the data, you can't get the information, staff is reluctant, maybe staff is not in favor of what you're doing, so they're not too enthused. I'll plead guilty to that. Staff has opinions too. They work this stuff every day, and that's not always, they sometimes are a brake on bad ideas, intentionally or unintentionally. So it's simply that when you reduce it down to the smallest common denominator, I think the commission, I think I would like to have somebody that when I need help, I can call on to give me help, and that is my liaison to the commission. I view the administrator and the chief deputy administrator as the liaison to the commission. They should be the ones that come to us and talk to us about issues. That's just the way I feel. And how it's defined, I'm flexible with whatever you all want, or if you're happy with the present, then that's okay too. But I wanted this issue brought up.
McKiernan.
I totally agree. I think it's a great idea. Some of you have heard my analogy of air traffic control board, to know all the planes that are in the air. Well, this person helps keep track of all the issues, helps track them. What's the status of them? What's the next follow-up for us? So that we've got somebody who not only knows all the issues that are up in the air, all the information requests that are up in the air, but is tracking them. And I think we're probably over halfway there with our current position. Just maybe with some rethinking, maybe some relocation, but I like the idea.
Commissioner Philbrook.
Exactly. Plus, you started out exactly what I was thinking, but I was always also thinking that there are times when certain issues hit us all an issue may hit several of us at the same time, and we haven't even talked about the issue, but it's all come to us individually, and all of a sudden this liaison is going to, get this input there's several of us coming to them. And that is a way for us to know that this is a hot topic for sure. And since there's only supposed to be so many of us talking at a time, we need to be careful of how many folks are conversing on certain things. So I think having that liaison can really help us through that quagmire in quite an efficient way.
Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. Do you envision this, Commissioner Walker, as an addition to the head count?
Is your microphone on?
Thank you. Is that better?
Yes.
Do you envision this as an increase in head count or just a reorganization of present duties?
Well, I certainly, clearly there could be an addition to the head count. That was not my first thought. My thought was a repurposing of the role of the liaison, and combine that with some reasonable amount of discretionary funding for an independent consultant or consultants, not necessarily a lawyer, an engineer, a baker, whatever it might be that was necessary for the big issues. And it would have to be a commission decision. No one commissioner could, there were the plays were numerous, and I certainly started this with the idea of the repurposing of the one position. But it clearly could be that, depending on the workload that we would put on an individual, it could add a person or two people. But I can't imagine that even the 9 of us that are here now could keep 3 people busy full-time investigating ideas that we have. That we have to be reasonable because of the budget and the cost, but yeah, that's certainly one option if the work justifies it, but clearly a repurposing of the role. And maybe some consultant money. I know Commissioner Walters mentioned that once before. Perhaps it'd be nice on occasion to be able to get independent legal advice, because sometimes we're in that position.
Commissioner Kane.
I like the idea of repurposing. I would want the person we've got the office space upstairs so they could be up there. And then we would see if we kept the person too busy before we would add somebody else. And I think Commissioner Walker and Walters both are right about maybe having some money set aside if we come across an issue that we want to ask some other lawyer, somebody with expertise, instead of just asking staff sometimes. Nothing against staff.
Commissioner Murguia.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I don't have an answer or a solution to what I'm going to say, but just a couple of things that I've seen happen, and maybe there's another way to address it. But I just have always thought it was odd that when our government needs a legal opinion, we ask the internal staff that we sign their paycheck. And it usually comes from the administrator's office. I just think that's odd. I would think that it would be more of an opinion you would get. You would obviously pay the law firm, but you would want to outsource that opinion so that employee didn't feel the pressure to give a legal opinion that they thought their boss wanted. That's always concerned me. It just seems odd to me. And then a little more, leave it to me, I'll bring up a little more sensitive subject, but Mayor, you've been fantastic since you were elected at when people bring things to you that they want to come forward. I have seen you make a great effort in making sure that it gets on the agenda to get heard. There's 9 of us, we're always going to complain, it's not timely enough or whatever, but I think you've done a really good job. But I will tell you, my own personal experience is that prior to you being mayor, I could never get anything on the agenda. And at times, I felt like staff were being directed by our mayor to not put what I wanted or to stifle what I was trying to do. And that's where I think it becomes difficult for commissioners to be able to move forward and get things done. So truly, I mean sincerely when I tell you, I have not experienced that with you. But if you're looking at an overall good policy in case that occurs again in the future, I just think it would make sure that these 9 people up here have a voice. And right now, I can tell you that I do with you as mayor, but what if you're not mayor then and someone else is? And it goes
Well,
back.
just keep me as mayor, and you won't have to worry about a thing, Commissioner.
Exactly. That could work too. But hopefully you see what I'm saying. I'm really not trying to be rude or cause a problem. I'm just saying that's what I know I personally experience, and I don't want to see that happen for anybody else.
So I'd like to, this is good, and I believe, and I remember when we started to cut back on the staffing for the commission office, and Kane and Merdeal will remember this as well. When we went through the process of the recession and started freezing hires, we froze ours too. And so we used to have 2 full-time administrative folks up there and a full-time liaison. During that budget crunch, we went to 1.5 FTEs because Becky's part-time up there. She's also in the administrator's office. And we also, Sharon started accumulating other jobs in the organization. She started multitasking in a remarkable way. I think so that issue, we went from what I would say is a fairly thin staff already to an overstressed staff in terms of their capacity to really work with, considering you have 10 commissioners, to have one, it really, and they're doing other jobs, and that was exactly right. And we saw, as hard as Sharon worked, we saw a decline in what she was just physically able to do because she had other jobs as well. We also, now the recession we're moving through it. We did make a decision last year in our budget, as part of our accomplishing our budget for 2014, that we asked the administrator to reduce the total employees by 10 full-time equivalents this year. So that's an active process in terms of getting our budget where we needed to be. We needed another $500,000, and the way we voted to do that was to reduce, whether we didn't fill positions or whatever through attrition, but to save that $500,000 by reducing 10 full-time equivalents. So in terms of a budget impact, I think one of the things that we certainly would be the low-hanging fruit would be to look at having 2 full-time administrator assistants up there, because when I was commissioner, that's who I sent. When I got a neighborhood complaint, I'd ask Janet or then Peggy to track that down for me, and they were able to do a lot of that community component. The external, I like the way McKiernan phrased it. They were kind of the external filter for the calls coming in, and then the liaison was the internal person to go into the organization for us when there were things that we needed. I think restoring the 2 administrators, if we look at that as a priority, assistance, and looking at having a liaison whose full-time job is the commission, rather than it being, I don't know what the percentage was, 25, 50%, 50%. I think restoring that, I think there would be a return of service that would be the low-hanging fruit in terms of moving forward immediately. It seems, in looking at our priorities for our thing, looking at essentially restoring 1 full-time position that's been cut out of the we used to have 3 full-times, now we have 1.5. No, we have 3, now we have 2. And now we need to go back. I think going back to the 3 would be a step in the right direction. One of the things I want to say in terms of independent consultants, one of the things that this body has the authority to do at any time is to authorize an external look at any issue that we want. And we've done that already. We did that we want a full look at the fire department. We just talked about this with the sheriff's department. We're asking for consultation and input there. If there is an issue that we think is a particularly sticky wicket with legal, it would be very easy for this body to say, we would like to, and we do this for a lot of ways. I mean, for a lot of our legal matters, we hire out consultants on a regular basis. In fact, the T-Bones piece, did we not have external legal that helped work on that? So there are a number of issues, and this group can trigger that anytime we want to just, in this meeting, to say, that's an important issue, and we want to make sure that we get a second look at it. We could trigger that at any time. The key would be to have the funding in place already, where we wouldn't be sending the administrator scrambling in terms of how to pay for that. But if we did put a budget together for that, whether we added it into the legal department or somewhere else, this group can direct that kind of call at any time. The other piece that's important that I think we need to consider, and this is an ongoing issue. There are times when there's one commissioner that wants something. I know when Kane and I were working on, early on, years ago, we were working on the issue of the minimum wage. And so we needed a ton of staff time. We needed a ton of legal time. We needed a ton of our liaisons time, because it was a complicated issue. Well, it was so much time that was going to be required by the staff that we actually came to the body and said, is this an issue that everybody is willing for us to work on? Because it's one thing if it's a small project for us to ask for a lot of staff time, but as one or two commissioners, if we're demanding a lot of workflow, then it's fair for the administrator to come back, or the mayor to come back, or the other commissioners to come back and say, let's check that out and make sure that's a priority for everybody in the body before we spend a lot of time on an issue. And that's a careful balance, isn't it? In terms of how much time does one commissioner's issue, or even two commissioners, push before we come to the body. So Kane and I came to the body and said, do you all support this generally? We haven't gotten there yet, but do you support generally the idea of working on the minimum wage? Because we wanted to take, our minimum wage in Kansas was $2 an hour. And somebody ought to say that's outrageous. So
You're making a motion for another one, I second it.
So we worked on the minimum wage piece, and what we did is we tied Kansas City, Kansas minimum wage to the federal minimum wage. Independently of any other county in Kansas, or city in Kansas, we did it ourselves. And then we took it to the state, and they passed it as state law. So the Kansas minimum wage is now tied to the federal minimum, which I'm very proud of that legislation. But it was an example where it took the legal staff 6 drafts, at least 6 drafts, to get that project done. But you can't ask that kind of workload without coming to the whole commission and saying, is this even a priority of anybody else? Because if it's not, at some point the administrator and the legal head of legal, which would have been Hal at that time, would have had to say, you're killing me. If this isn't a commission priority, we can't commit these kind of hours to it. So I think that's the kind of balance that I want to see, to make sure that as work comes in, we're identifying, hey, this is going to be a big project. Let's get a buy-in from the whole commission before we task our staff going that far out. So those are the initial thoughts that I have. But I think there's some ways to restore some staffing, because I think as you've come in new, especially those of you that come in new, you're coming into a much leaner staff than we had 8 years ago, 6 years ago. And I think there's a reason you're feeling the crunch. Commissioner Markley.
I was just going to kind of give an example of what you were just talking about. I think that balance will probably come easier than we think, just because I think by the time something's big enough where it's requiring a huge amount of staff time, I think most of the commissioners are aware of the issue by that point. I think what we're looking for is more of those situations where, and I'm going to give this example, I asked Jody to do some research for me on vacant housing and how we might be able to manage our vacant housing through taxation or some other means, and she provided me this excellent research. And it's that kind of issue that I think we're looking to address, because I didn't know yet whether it was something that I would want to move forward, because I didn't know whether it was even possible or constitutional or allowable, or whether anyone else was doing it. So I needed this one little research project to find out whether, which by the way, it is something I'm excited about and I'm hoping we will move forward with, but down the line. But you know, I just needed the one piece of research to know whether it was even an issue, and I think that's the kind of information we're looking for this person in this position to fill, is the one piece of research that tells us whether it's a big enough issue to bring it further before the full commission, or whether it's just something that's not going to work and we might as well just not even look any further.
Sure, absolutely. Commissioner McKiernan.
I think that's a great example of how this person could really streamline things and ultimately lower the burden maybe on some other staff, because I've been asking for some similar research on vacant housing. So if you and I were both going to that same person and we really developed a habit as commissioners of going to that person first, then that person could say, well, as a matter of fact, I've been doing some research, and that person then could fill me in without me having to bug anybody else on what that person's already learned, and then maybe could get you and me and anybody else who's interested together for a little briefing and a brainstorming. So I think there could be some payoff in terms of lowering overall time.
Jody, if you would just send that research to the full commission, you're going to love it. We're going to have so much fun.
Well, and I'll tell you, a good policy too is it's pretty easy to do with email. If there's a piece of information that you're asking for, it's a pretty good likelihood that other commissioners would want it, and it's easy to just send to everybody. You know, if people are open to that, just to get an input on it. But you could, you know, you don't have to do that, but it'd be pretty easy to do.
So Mayor, I like that idea, but Brian's right. We got to be careful about that when we're all talking via email to each other about an item that could potentially come in front of the governing body.
No, that's right.
collectively. So I mean, I like your idea, but we're limited on how we can do that. So this is what's difficult for me. And since you weren't an in-district commissioner, I think that might be why you've always been an at-large representative. And so I think I'm starting to figure out maybe that's why you may not completely understand. When you represent a district and a very specific constituency, there are very specific needs, and there can be very different from your other commissioners. And if that is the process internally that you have to get consensus before you move an item forward or ask for assistance, it may never get to the top of the list. Mike Kane's in all likelihood not ever going to have the same issues I do in Argentina or Rosedale. They're totally different neighborhoods with a totally different demographic. So I would just tell you, he may empathize with it. He may have one or two situations like that, but it may not be at the top of his list. He may have a different list of priorities, and he should. He serves a different group of people. So for commissioners that are in district that want to get things done and take initiative, I struggle with that process. So because there are things I want to work on and move forward. I'm not sure I have a solution. So and I hate this format. I know we're working on a special session.
We're going to be in this. We'll have our special sessions on the 5th floor soon.
Because I feel like I have my back to these three commissioners here, and I'm not engaging them, and I really don't mean to do that to you.
They've got your back.
Thank you. But so how about this? I think we've had a good discussion here. Is there a way that you could appoint a couple of commissioners to come forward with like a menu of maybe potential options, 2 or 3 options to present to the full commission and say, this is what we heard, what do you think about this? And do it in fairly short order?
Yeah, we can't let Hal off the hook. He's got to be on that. But I think we can ask if there's 3 commissioners that would be willing to work on this. I think we can certainly ask that group to get together and take this feedback and try to work out something that would be amenable. Was that a volunteer or was that? No, okay, just a question. Commissioner Townsend.
Thank you. I know Commissioner Markley was going to say that. No, but just for further clarification, for example, as Commissioner Markley said, she asked for something from legal. Would this person, and that requires very special expertise, so would this person be used to do those types of things, or go to legal and say Commissioner Markley needs this. And I
Yes.
would not want to be, as a commissioner, put in a situation of having to go all the time to this liaison, because then we may be creating another bottleneck. It might be easier just to go directly to department head or whoever it is for the quick fix. So I hope that's not part of what we're envisioning
Keep talking, Commissioner
with
Townsend.
this. I'm just asking.
I love it.
No, I think the key, I think the key is, as a general rule, and I think we've all heard this and have talked about this, you know, the general rule is, it's really, the commission not going any deeper into the organization than the department head level is really helpful for the administrator and for the whole work. I mean, when we start talking to, you know, line staff, that really makes it uncomfortable and difficult for people to do their jobs. The department head level is really as deep as we want folks getting into the organization, and if something needs to go further down, then we need to go through, you know, the administrator. But the liaison could certainly help facilitate those conversations, because the advantage of having a liaison whose full-time role is just the commission stuff, and there's more focus there, which I think is very valuable. If that person's full-time role is that, and people are all utilizing that person, then that person starts to get a feel for the workload and the workflow, and can give that feedback back to you all, and say, you know, if you say, you know, I want this from legal, and they can say, I've just asked legal for 3 other things from 3 other commissioners. It's probably going to be a week or 2 out, but I'll put it on the list. You know, that kind of thing is going to happen. And having that liaison there is really a helpful tool. And then it comes to the capacity issue. So when there's things that we want in the organization, and we all do, then that feedback needs to come back to this body to say, we've got a capacity issue, because legals, you know, they're 3 weeks out on our requests, or a month out, and I would bet Jody wouldn't argue with us if we offered to fund another attorney in her office to free up workflow. But that's where that liaison can give feedback to the commission and say, boy, you've been making a lot of requests out of this department, and I think that there's a capacity issue in there that you all need to address, because we're the only ones that can address the capacity issues. So I think that's a very valuable piece. The question that was asked is, are there 3 commissioners that would be interested in being a task force to work on this, to come up with a proposal, and it would need to be in relatively short order, because if it's going to address money, we need to have that in front of us. ASAP.
I'll do it. I'll work on it. Yeah, because we're not letting Hal
No,
off
wait
the
a minute,
hook.
wait a minute.
Is it the company you don't like, Mr. Walker?
Oh, Hal, you better not agree with that.
That's the question.
It's not the issue of the work. It's the idea. One of the things that I thought was always beneficial to me when I first ran was the fact that I'd been on staff. And I have to say that does give me a knowledge and an advantage in some respects that new commissioners don't get for a while. It's also an obstacle. And I think this is perhaps a bigger deal than we're all acting. Other commissions have not had this direct help. I'd like a fresh pair of, or 3 fresh pairs of eyes on the subject matter to make the proposal. I've been pretty clear. I'm for additional help. I don't care if it's just the liaison, but I want to keep open the option of additional bodies. And I don't expect this person to be an errand person or a messenger. I expect this person to do work and to coordinate at the department head and below level to get across what we're looking for, and keep us from having to make phone calls to department heads and, you division heads. I don't like that idea. I never liked it when they called me. I was a department head. I was their legal counsel. But it was very difficult to say no to them. And I'm sure Jody has found that to be true too. So I'd like a third person, but not with my biases of having been staff for 30 years.
Well, I have biases, I'm still in. I'm in.
All right, is there anyone else who would like to participate on this? All right, right on. Okay, so we have a plan moving forward. Walters and Murguia and Markley, the three commissioners, are going to work on this. Thank you, and come back.
Would you have that by Monday, please?
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah, they've been waiting for that.
Yeah.
When what's the time frame, Mayor, that you'd like? it
Well,
back
the
by?
budget's coming, and if we're going to we've already made it. This is where the balance comes. We've made a commitment in this year to reduce 10 full-time equivalents. If we're going to look at either even restoring full-time equivalent, which I think is kind of imperative to this office, we need to at least restore the full-time equivalent we've taken out of the commission office. But that probably needs to come to us.
Can we just say before strategic planning?
Yes, that would be us. Great minds think alike. That's right where I was headed. I think this would be
Or
a
is
good
that-
piece
that's
to
March
have in
8th,
front
right?
Fantastic.
for a strategic plan.
And then present at strategic planning?
Sure.
Okay, that's great.
Mr. Hayes.
If I could, Mayor, listening to the conversation and on behalf of staff, I think there are a number of great suggestions on the table. I think the whole notion of beefing up in the commission office and giving you more support and assistance is essential. I really do. A couple of things, though, during the discussion I just want to call your attention to. One has to do with the notion of confidentiality. And I think when each one of you came into office, we met. And I hope that you'll recall one of the first things that I pledged to you was confidentiality. And this notion that we're a bunch of different teams with different agendas is the furthest thing from my mind as your administrator, and I hopefully for your future administrator. You all set policy, you set the direction. Not one of you individually, not the mayor individually, but you collectively. So you do have a voice and you do provide the direction. But there are times where you individually have an initiative, there's a difference of opinion with another commissioner, and I will tell you that it's my position and that of our chief counsel that we hold those confidences, and you've had me come to you on a number of occasions to ask your permission to share with another commission because I thought you were working on the same thing or I thought the time was right to do that. So please, I think this notion and this, I'll suggest it's a misconception that we have a bunch of different teams up here going in different directions is not correct. You are the commission. We expect to be responsive to you and your direction and carry out what direction and policy directives and budget priorities you set. So in terms of confidentiality, I think if I could suggest to the committee that's going to work on this, I think we need to reassert the need for confidentiality from whatever process you come up with, that staff member is not reporting to the administrator. That staff member does not have an accountability back, and while it may be appointed by the administrator under the charter, it would only be done with the support of the commission and have the commission provide feedback and reaction to how well that staff member is performing. So I think we can accomplish what you want to, and if there's additional detail that's needed, we can work on that. We can beef up resource. That person can go to different staff members in the organization and get that research for you. So I feel very strongly we need to support you in making good policy, and we need to afford you confidentiality. Thank you, Mayor.
That's good. I'll just make a plug also for open data. That the more information that is readily available, that's at our fingertips, that we don't have to make 3 phone calls to get, is going to help the public, it's going to help us, it's going to help the staff, it's going to help everybody. But the more information, when we have questions that we can just go get the data ourselves, because sometimes
My super enthusiastic committee is all over it.
that's exactly right. So I think the open data piece, because it's moving, our world has moved to such a point that if your data isn't open, people think you're hiding it, right? It's just a change in culture in the world. And so we have to push our data out ahead of the requests of the commissioners and ahead of the requests of the public. If it's eligible for a Freedom of Information request, it's already public information. Put it on the website. It's public data. So anyway, I just saw an opportunity, window of opportunity to plug open data. All right, anything else on this topic? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you. Until 7 o'clock.